Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be having a look at how Bitcoin's been tracking along since our last video here on Tuesday, when we were touching on the fact that the bottom was likely in for Bitcoin and we should see price move to the upside, just like Bitcoin did back in 2021 when it was putting in its high. Then we're going to touch on the altcoin market now that we have made it back to the range highs and how we're only 3% away from setting a new all-time high on total too. Then we're briefly going to touch on some select altcoins and have a look at our trades like Ethereum here and like XRP here, which is tracking along just like discussed in our last video. And we're also going to have a look at how some of our better performing trades here, like the Solana trade that we took back on the 26th of August, has progressed since then, and the Dogecoin trade, which has also performed quite well over the last week. So now that we have the Bitcoin dominance falling again, while we're starting to see Bitcoin rally off the lows, and we're starting to see similar market conditions to the way things played out in 2021 before Bitcoin and the altcoin market came in for its top, all come together now as we are just 5 days out from the next Fed meeting, where there is a 100% chance that they are going to cut rates. So could this be enough to push the altcoin market out into new all-time highs? That's what we're going to cover in today's video, guys, so let's jump into it. So firstly, guys, we'll touch on Bitcoin, as we have seen Bitcoin slowly grind up back to this $116,000 level. And if you caught our last video, you'll understand the significance of this level, as if we were to compare Bitcoin's price to the fractal from 2021, this price level and the rejection we're seeing here on Bitcoin does point to very similar price behavior that we actually seen back in the 2021 top. However, structurally looking at this from a more zoomed out perspective, if we were to line this up similar to the way things played out structurally in 2021, we can see that the tops that came in here line up with the bottoms that we've seen. So it's most likely that we do see Bitcoin push a little bit higher from these levels to about 118,000, where if things were to continue playing out like this fractal, which is how Bitcoin topped in 2021, we should start to see some short-term rejection, Bitcoin find support, most likely above or around this $112,000 region, before we can then see Bitcoin push to the upside. Now, this is my base case for how I think things are going to play out, because we do see price continuing to track along like we've seen in our fractal here back from 2021. However, there still is a scenario in which Bitcoin could push higher here, consolidate, not come in for this back test, and then we could see price rip higher and Bitcoin could essentially push out from this consolidation phase, which would most likely be the moment where we see a lot of the altcoin market start to outperform. Like seen here, when similar structures ended up playing out for Bitcoin that marked the lows, what we did see was price eventually shoot up, but there was no back test, and it simply took us back to the highs before then the correction came in. And that if price was to continue to play out like that today, then we would most likely see no pullback and price continue to climb higher. However, considering how similar price has been playing out to this fractal here from 2021, I think it's most likely here at some point we do see Bitcoin come back and find support around this $112,000 region. Now, moving into the altcoin market, we can see that Ethereum has finally caught a bid, finally moved off these lows after some of the most boring price action we've seen in Ethereum in months. It has started to break from this accumulation structure down here at the lows, and that structurally, if Ethereum was to continue to perform like it did back in 2021 when Bitcoin was going through the price action that played out in this fractal, what ended up happening next for Ethereum was when price pushed back to below that previous all-time high before then consolidating there, having a slight pullback and then moving higher. So if we do start to see things play out like this on Ethereum, it would further confirm our bias that we are starting to see more and more similarities to how price structure actually developed and ended up playing out in 2021. Which then leads us into XRP, which so far has been also performing exactly like this fractal here, which again was pulled from the highs of 2021 before XRP ended up putting in that final parabolic leg, which ended up giving us the top of XRP back in 2021, where it topped at the same time as Bitcoin. This was how price structure ended up playing out before that time came. So monitoring XRP here on lower timeframes, we will be looking for XRP to pull back and consolidate, while at the same time we are expecting Bitcoin to do something quite similar. So again, if we are to line up these fractals like we did on the Bitcoin one, it is most likely that XRP is pretty close to topping out before in the short term we can see a pullback, most likely leading into the FOMC meeting in 5 days from now. Which then takes us over to a lot of our altcoins that we've been trading and doing really well on here. We can see that Solana has broken to the upside of this channel, and so far when we did take that trade on the 26th of August, this did end up being the bottom for Solana. And so far we held through all of the push up, the grind, and the consolidation, and now we still are holding the trade, and we can see that it is doing quite well. However, it is very likely that at some point, like seen in the past with structures like this, Solana does come back quite violently and backtest the highs before then moving higher, which again lines us up with how we see things playing out for XRP and Bitcoin. And then moving over and having a look at Dogecoin, which has been another one of our winning trades. I am really liking how structure is developing here on Dogecoin, but it wouldn't surprise me at some point if we do see Dogecoin come back and retest these lows here. And the reason I'm discussing all of this with you guys isn't because I want price to come crashing down or for the upwards momentum that we've been seeing during the course of this week to slow down, but rather because I am looking to add to a lot of my positions. And as you guys can see, the trades down below here are all in profit, and I have taken my first little bit of profit off the table and realized some of the gains here from the positions that we took over the course of the last week or two, with the two winning positions actually being the Solana trade here and the Dogecoin trade. However, if I am to see price continue to play out like it did in 2021 and we see some kind of short-term pullback here across the altcoin market and for Bitcoin, it will give me a lot more confidence in loading up and adding to a lot of these positions, as I'll have a better read on how market structure is playing out, especially if it keeps playing out like it did back in 2021. And that if Bitcoin comes for a back test of these $112,000 levels at the same time we see a lot of these altcoins come for a back test of their range highs or significant areas of importance here, then it's most likely that I will add to a lot of these positions and look to trade them higher, as the next move would most likely be up for Bitcoin if things were to continue to play out like they did in 2021. But all in all, guys, pretty good week for crypto. It's been a pretty good September so far, not just because we're seeing the altcoin market actually push to the upside and start to approach that old all-time high, but because we are seeing Bitcoin move off the lows here, and during the exact same time we're seeing the Bitcoin dominance continue to break down, which is continuously pointing to the fact that the altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin, confirming my bias that we are in the final stages of this market cycle. And like touched on in last week's video, when the Fed ends up cutting rates here on the 17th of September, I'll most likely be starting a rough 60-day timer before I'll be looking to close out a lot of my positions here, and most likely exit the crypto market if we do see a lot of the coins that we are trading reach the price targets that we are looking at. So guys, I'll keep you updated on how all of this ends up playing out. It's been a pretty good push off the lows. I will most likely expect price to push just a little bit higher before we see that pullback as we go into the weekend here. And then going into next week, if we do get that pullback here on Bitcoin, we'll be looking for the bounce before accumulating and adding to a lot of our altcoin positions. So until then, if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. If you're new here, you can subscribe down below. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comment section. And I'll see you guys next week.